Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Luffy ate Bison fruit and trained by Garp to master it? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Oblivion Overlord for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Let's start this video. The 6-year-old Luffy is walking alongside the beach, looking for things that could catch his eye. Ask and you shall receive, the old saying said. A certainly strange-looking object caught Luffy's eye, and he bounded over to it looking curious. It was a strange-looking dark purple fruit that was in the shape of a skull. It has a lot of black swirls, and the dark red stem is poking out the left eye of the skull. This is strange. It looks weird, but it might be delicious. Luffy mumbled to himself as he unhinged his jaw. How does anyone in this world do that anyway? And ate the whole thing. Luffy started rolling on the floor trying to get rid of its taste. Oh my god, that tasted horrible. He yelled out, rolling on the sand and feeling a little pain in his eyes. Finally, after a long roll of disgust, Luffy stood up and saw something glowing. He looked to his left and looked at the sea. He saw himself, however he looked different. For one thing, his hair did not have the color purple in it. He saw now his black hair got longer a bit and his hair gained purple highlights in it. However, the most prominent change he found was his eyes. The white background was replaced with an endless black. And the eyes, look up at my little rant, are really weird looking. Then Luffy reacted like any other person would. Ah. What the hell is this? Why are my eyes like this? Change it back, change it back. As Luffy finished yelling that, he felt the eyes turn off. Looking back at the sea, he saw that his eyes are back to normal, but they now have this strange dark red glow. Huh. This kind of looks cool. I wonder what that fruit did. Just as he said that, he got images of him doing various things. He was standing in a cool stance and suddenly threw out his arm. Bones of pure white with a black glow came out of nowhere and pierced the enemy like a sword would. He then thrusted his other hand and clenched it, and a heart appeared in front of the enemy, making him and Luffy confused. Until he saw the other Luffy throw his hand to the side, making the guy fly to where Luffy made him to. Finally, Luffy held a hand up high and a skull of a dragon with glowing red eyes also came out of nowhere and charged a really bright orb. It fired a huge blast at the enemy, turning them into dust. There was still one more enemy when Luffy saw the other Luffy's eye spark a bit, then bones sprouted out from underneath the guy, stabbing him and killing him. Luffy shook himself off from what he's seen. Whoa, that was awesome. I am gonna try and do that. Luffy held out his hand, and from then on Luffy tried to master and unlock more abilities. 2 years later, we see Luffy sitting in a bar eating some meat while listening to Shanks' tales of the Grand Line. Ever since Shanks and his crew dropped off and made Fuchsia Island their temporary base of operations for a few visits, days have been much more fun than before. Luffy was just about to ask Makino if she had some juice left when the doors of the bar burst open. Luffy lazily looked at the entrance. Make way for the Scourge of the Mountain. Haguma the bear, bandit leader, bursted in and started walking to the counter. Oi wench. Give me and my boy some sake. Haguma all but yelled out while eyeing Makino a bit. Luffy saw Makino's smile become a little forced now. I'm sorry, but we are all out. Makino stated. Haguma asked and looked around. Then what the hell are they drinking, huh? Haguma yelled. Makino's smile became even more forced, making Luffy frown a bit. Sake, sir. We are fresh out of stock. Makino tried hard not to make herself sound repulsed. Shanks held out a bottle to Haguma, making the bandit leader look at him. Sorry about that. Here, I have a bottle. Haguma slowly grabbed the bottle before swinging to smash the bottle on Shanks' head. He would have had Luffy decided not to intervene. Mid-swing, a heart appeared in front of Haguma, making everyone except Luffy look at it confused. Everyone heard a task and looked at the origin of the sound. You guys are interrupting a nice time. I suggest you all, Luffy said slowly, as the other bandits started having their own hearts appearing in front of them. Luffy slowly turned around, his eyes closed. He slowly opened his left eye a little, letting everyone see a rather evil glow in his eye. He suddenly smirked, making everyone sweat a little. Should leave. Luffy finished before raising a hand, making all the hearts turn dark purple, with a red glow and a black circle in the heart. Luffy then thrust his hand forward quickly, making Haguma and every other bandit fly away and out the bar. Luffy stood up and picked up the bottle using a similar method before floating it to Shanks, all the while slowly walking to the exit. Enjoy your time here, guys. I'll take care of these clowns. Luffy lazily said. Everyone looked at Luffy with wide eyes. They had never seen the little boy do this kind of thing before. He was usually just happy-go-lucky, easygoing and a relaxed person. Haguma and the bandit started getting up slowly, a little disoriented from the forced flight. They all heard small footsteps. They looked at the entrance and saw Luffy walking out slowly with his hands in his pockets. Stopping just a few feet away from the group of bandits, Luffy looked at them with normal eyes. "You should leave and never come back if you know what's good for you," Luffy threatened. Higuma stood up erratically. "Who do you think you are? Don't you know who I am? I am Higuma the mountain bear. Me and my boys can come and go as we please. And there's no way that a snot-nosed brat like you can do a thing about it," the mountain bear spat out. Silence reigned a bit. Everyone in the village, including Shanks and his pirates, looked out at the confrontation. The silence reigned long and combined with Luffy's dead stare, unnerved everyone including the so-called fearless bandits. Luffy sighed and moved so that his hands were now crossed on his dot. "Well, this so-called snot-nosed brat just threw you guys out a building without even touching you. What do you say about that, huh? Teddy bear?" Luffy commented. Higuma felt his eye twitch. "God damn it. Kill this kid." The bandits charged at Luffy, making him sigh again. Luffy closed his eyes and just as quickly opened his left eye, showing everyone fully what was there. The evil glow of Luffy's left eye sent shivers down everyone's spine. All the bandits that tried to charge Luffy suddenly stopped in midair. The hearts were back. "I guess diplomacy is over. Welp. Can't say I tried." Luffy then placed his hands in his pockets. Before suddenly the entire sky turned black and the area around Luffy and the bandits turned into a blackish fog that can still be perfectly seen through. It's a beautiful day outside, birds are singing, flowers are blooming. On days like these, guys like you Luffy started before he suddenly disappeared before reappearing in the sky. "Should be burning in hell," Luffy finished as he quickly held out a hand and slammed it downwards. Higuma and the bandits got slammed into the ground hard, everyone heard bones breaking. Luffy then raised his hands up quickly as his eye sparked. The ground below the bandits cracked before bones shot out, stabbing Higuma and every single bandit that was there. Before they got the chance to rest, Luffy then floated them up and held out both his hands before clapping once. Higuma and the bandits floating in the air heard something flying fast in the wind. Some turned left and some turned right. Everyone's eyes widened as they saw a huge amount of bones heading towards the bandits. The bones passed through, cutting, stabbing, and slicing through the group of bandits, making them cry out in pain. They all fell to the ground before begging for mercy. "Sorry guys. You made your choice long ago," Luffy stated solemnly. Everyone saw his eye spark before two dragon skulls materialized on his sides. Luffy held out a single hand making the skulls move around so that the beams would meet in the middle, with Higuma and the bandits panicking while looking around. Luffy said one last thing. "Sorry guys, no hard feelings." He finished as he clenched his hands into a fist, making the skulls fire a blast. Higuma and the bandits screamed in terror before being disintegrated. The skulls disappeared and everything turned to normal. Luffy sighed before walking back into the bar. Noticing everyone gawking at him, Luffy ignored them and sat on the stool. Luffy then looked back up smiling like an idiot. "Nah. Makino-chan. Do you have any juice?" The casual answer made everyone face a fault. Luffy couldn't help but start laughing. Hehehe. Ink Sans laugh only a little lighter. "You guys make me laugh. Haha." Few minutes later. We see Luffy drinking a glass of orange juice. Ignoring the fact Shanks and his crew were staring at Luffy like he was strange. Finally Luffy had enough and whined out. "Oi. Come on guys. Why are you looking at me funny?" Shanks finally spoke. "Luffy, did you eat any strange looking fruit?" Surprised by the question, Luffy nodded. "Yep, I ate one 2 years ago on a beach." Shanks nodded and asked. "What did it look like?" Luffy just shrugged. "Shaped like a human skull, with swirl markings, and the stem was in the left eye. Just like when my eye activated. Though it isn't my weak spot, yeah." Luffy finished and did not notice that Lucky Roo was flipping through a book madly. Lucky Roo finally stopped at a page and yelled out. "AHA. Found it." Everyone crowded around the big man. "A Sans no Mi, a fruit whose power is unknown due to no one ever eating it before, because of no one has ever heard of what a Sans is, and probably will not risk getting possibly a useless power, even if you got to eat a devil fruit. Wow, if people knew what kind of power that fruit gave them," Lucky Roo stated in awe. Shanks stared at Luffy with stars in his eyes. "How cool is THAAT so Luffy, what else can you do besides the bones and the COOL skull blasters?" Luffy laughed at the fact Shanks was acting like a kid when it should be the other way around. Looking at Shanks with a small smile. "I can do a lot of things, but I don't want to rely on my fruit much. I only use the basic bones and blasters, anything else is for harder enemies, and they are called Geister blasters. Before you ask, I don't know what a Geister is, but it fits right. To me at least." Shanks smiled. "Good thinking, it is true that you shouldn't rely on your fruit powers so much as Anchor, and those Geister blasters are so." Luffy gained a tick mark on his head and a twitchy eye. "If I am an Anchor then you are Tomato Hair," Luffy barked back. Silence reigned before everyone started laughing, except Shanks whose face was one they would forever remember. "Tomato Hair, ha ha ha." Oh my god. Shanks, you just got burned. Ben stated. Shanks looked at Ben with playful betrayed eyes. Ben why also I am not the tomato hair you anchor. Shanks yelled at Luffy with shark teeth. Luffy then gained a deadpan face before holding out a tomato, making everyone confused until Luffy put it beside Shanks' hair. It is the same color, therefore I dub thee tomato hair. Making everyone burst into another round of laughs again. The bar was then filled with the sounds of a man and a kid arguing and laughter. Few days later. We now see Luffy, Shanks and his crew on the harbor, getting ready to go. You sure you don't want to come with us, Luffy? We could use someone with those COOL blasters. Shanks asked once more. Luffy just shook his head and gave Shanks a cheeky grin. Nope. A pirate king can't have a captain. That would just be stupid. Luffy finished with a bigger grin. Shanks smiled at that. Pirate king, huh? Luffy nodded. Yeah. I am gonna get a crew far better than yours and I will become the pirate king. Shanks smiled wider. Then Luffy felt something on his head and saw that it was Shanks' straw hat. You can return that to me when you become pirate king then, until that. Wear it with pride for me, okay? Shanks finished with a big grin. Luffy started tearing up. Thanks Shanks, I promise. We will meet in the Grand Line and my crew will beat yours. So don't be beaten by anyone, okay, tomato hair? Luffy finished with a cheeky grin. Making Shanks gain a tick mark and the others laugh. Of course I won't, who do you think I am? Shanks yelled with shark teeth. Luffy then surprised everyone by suddenly hugging Shanks. Take care out there. I mean it, Dad. Making everyone tear up and Shanks cry a bit. Don't worry kid, I ain't gonna lose just yet. Shanks and his crew then boarded the ship and set sail, waving at everyone goodbye. Makino looked at Luffy. You're going to miss them, won't you? Luffy nodded, wiping his eyes. Of course, but we will meet each other again. I'm sure of it. Major time skip cause I am too lazy and want to go. 9 years later. The pier was crowded with people from the village and they were there to see two people off. I guess the town wanted to see us off, huh, Luffy-kun? A green-haired woman giggled. It was Makino. She is now at the height of 5'9" with smooth green hair that reaches her. She has an hergless figure, similar to a certain black-haired archaeologist. Robin sneezes cutely. What was that? She also has silky smooth skin and has shiny black eyes. She is currently wearing a green warrior type dress with white stripes and an orange sash, holding up a black cloth armor she made for herself. Think Sengoku Basaramatsu clothes not including the bandana. She has an Ajinata as tall as she is and a Geister pistol on her hip. I guess so is Makino-chan. A black-haired teenager laughed quietly. It is Luffy. He is big for a 17 years old for one thing. He is 6'2" and has messy black hair that reaches just below his shoulders. He has a well-muscled figure, not overly muscled, but not too lean. He has sun-kissed skin and glowing black eyes. He is wearing a closed dark red cardigan and black pants tucked underneath his boots. He is wearing black steel-toed boots that have purple rims. He has a captain's coat hanging off his shoulders like a cape. It is colored black with red trimmings on the edges and dark purple buttons. There is a white symbol on its back. The Geister blaster skull is placed on the back with a straw hat drawn behind it and 6 bones held out in a hexagon. He has his straw hat on his head and a rather strange-looking spear held upright by his hand as tall as he is. Samurai warriors for Tadakatsu tiger pike. Luffy nodded and looked at everyone. Welp. We are gonna go now. Wish us luck, guys. Luffy yelled out as Makino waved at everyone as the two boarded what appeared to be a black ship with silver stripes, with dark purple railing and dark red windows. It has 3 stories of strange-looking cannons and the 4th level is the deck with large purple sails. Think the Pirates of the Caribbean Dauntless Endeavor with those colors. The name, Sea Dragon's Blade, is plated on the back of the ship. Aiden and her bandits were crying along with the other people of the village. The kid will go far. Won't he be, mayor? The mayor just shook his head, trying hard not to cry. He will bring shame to this village and he had to bring Makino with him. The mayor was crying a bit. Then he started crying in the river. I'm gonna miss that brat. Aiden cried even more as well. I know, right? Everyone said one last thing to the disappearing ship. We'll miss you. On the ship, play One Piece Luffy's fierce attack. Luffy just finished making the ship move with his abilities. He walked to Makino, who was currently leaning on a table looking at a map. Makino looked at Luffy with a grin. Well, Captain. What's our course? Luffy looked at Makino with a huge and cheeky grin. He slammed his spear on the deck, creating a small shockwave of wind, and turned around pointing his Tombojiri towards the horizon. To adventure. Luffy just shouted out with a big stupid grin on his face. Makino just shook her head and giggled. Aye, Captain. Luffy walked to the bow of the ship, his hair flowing in the wind. Shanks, Ace, Sabo, wait for me guys, cause I am on my way. We see Luffy sitting on the Geister Blaster figurehead of the Sea Dragon's blade drinking a hot mug of chocolate and Makino on the crow's nest with a cup of tea in one hand while looking through a telescope. The comfortable silence was ruined when they heard faint screaming, making both Luffy and Makino look at each other with serious faces before Luffy stood up and slammed his tombojiri on the figurehead. The sails unfurled and the ship started sailing even faster, intent on reaching the sounds of screams. Makino kept an eye out and spotted 2 ships. She jumped back down onto the deck. Luffy, there are 2 ships straight ahead, a cruise ship and a pirate ship. The pirate ship belongs to a pirate captain called Alvida. Luffy nodded without looking. Then why don't we give them some relief, eh? Luffy said with a small smirk. Makino shook her head in disbelief. Always want to cause trouble, are you, Luffy? On Alvida's ship. Kobe was just despairingly walking on the deck while most of the other crew members were on the other boat when something on the horizon caught his eyes. Looking towards the horizon, he saw a giant ship with its own pirate flag, making his eyes bulge and scream in terror. More pirates, I have no choice but to warn the others. Reaching to a sleeping crew member at the bell. Kobe ignored him because it would take too long and started ringing the bell, warning the other crew members and waking the sleeping ones up. A dwarf planet that goes by the name of Alvida came onto the deck. What the hell is going on here? Kobe yelled out. Another pirate ship coming from the north. Making everyone, including a certain navigator who was sneaking about, look towards the north, and what they saw scared them a bit. That ship is huge. The ship stopped a little away from them though. However, 2 figures jumped from the boat and onto their pirate ship. A dust cloud was generated from the forced landing. That went well. A male voice spoke out before a slap resounded throughout the deck. You know how I hate surprise jumps. A female voice then was heard. The cloud receded to show 2 dangerous-looking individuals. Luffy looked around. So this is the Alvida pirates. Not that impressed. He said, looking bored. Making every other pirate pissed. Makino, how about you fight? I am interested to see what kind of attacks you can pull off. He said, while Makino just rolled her eyes with a resigned smile. Alright. Alvida just got a tick mark that grew bigger and bigger before the dwarf planet yelled out. You little bastards. Get them. The pirates then charged at the 2. Makino just shook her head and just took them all out without killing even one of them. Making Alvida sweat a bit in fear, while a certain orange-haired navigator and Kobe sweated nervously, now knowing these 2 are very strong. Makino saw Kobe behind a barrel to her left and smiled softly at him. Now what's an adorable little munchkin like you doing on a pirate ship like this? Kobe blushed a bit as he looked even more nervous. I didn't want to be a pirate, I wanted to be a marine, but I got caught while I was fishing. Luffy out. You suck. Haha. Making an orange-haired navigator laugh a little, Makino glared at him while Kobe had crocodile tears on his face. Alvida finally had enough. Kobe. Tell me, who is the most beautiful in the seas? Kobe was about to satisfy her by telling that it was her when he remembered what an old man told him. I will achieve my dreams, even if I have to die trying. If I die, then I die. It only shows that I was meant to go that far anyway. I am terrible at this. Kobe's head was bowed when he brought it back up, yelling out. If anyone is the most beautiful in the seas, it's Miss Makino right here. And not you. I will become a marine. And the first pirate I will arrest will be you, you oversized whale. Making Luffy and Makino smile while Alvida gained a tick mark the size of a human head. That's it. You're dead, punk. The dwarf planet swung her mace at the little boy, making him close his eyes. I did it. Now I have no regrets. Well said, brat. Luffy just blocked the strike with his pinky finger, making everyone except Makino look at him with wide eyes and jaws dropped. Looking at Alvida, Luffy lightly pushed the mace with his pinky, making the mace fly off her hand. I will be the Pirate King. Luffy swung his tombojiri like a bat and smacked the palm at Alvida, sending her away screaming. Slamming his spear on the deck, making a small shockwave. Luffy looked towards the door. Come out, I know you're there. An orange-haired girl who was holding a bag full of treasure came out with a hand up. I'm out. Makino looked at her. Who are you? I doubt you are one of the Alvida pirates if you are stealing from them. Making the girl look at them with suspicion. Why do I have to tell you, pirates? Makino was about to say something when Luffy yelled out, looking towards the east. Marines. Making everyone look towards where he was looking at. 2 standard marine ships are slowly approaching, both firing at them, apparently not caring if they sank the cruise ship by accident. Looking towards the pink-haired boy and the orange-haired girl. I doubt that the Marines will discriminate, so we have to get out of here. We will drop you off at Shell Town, as we have to get some supplies there. Once we land there you can do what you want. Now it's your choice, come with us or be captured by Marines for being on a pirate ship. Luffy said as the Sea Dragon's blade parked itself beside Alvida's ship. Luffy and Makino jumped onto the ship as Nami and Kobe followed them. Luffy slammed his weapon on the deck before swinging it lightly towards the direction of Shell Town, making the ship unfurl its sails before moving towards that direction. However, the Marines are still firing at them, and Luffy sighed. He started walking to the back of the ship, much to the amusement of Makino and the confusion of Nami and Kobe. Luffy tossed his weapon up into the air and caught it by the pommel before swinging it at the Marine ships, throwing out a giant dark red blade attack with darker purple cracks. The attack made Nami and Kobe drop their jaws onto the deck. What the hell? They both yelled out in surprise. They all saw the attack cripple the two ships by cutting them in half. Luffy turned back to them. Sorry about that, they were stubborn. Luffy said that with a small smile. Kobe and Nami started sweating in fear due to this guy being strong as all hell. Luffy smiled softly at them. So, what is your name, miss? Nami gulped. It is common courtesy to introduce yourself first. Makino shook her head at her moxie. Well, she's not wrong. Well, my name is Makino, I like serving drinks, cooking, tending to my plants, and protecting my precious people. Luffy shook his head amused. Alright then, my name is Monkey D. Luffy, and I like milk, meat, and ketchup. I also like to cook, draw, and protect my precious people. Kobe then introduced himself. Well, my name is Kobe, and I like rice crackers and the color blue. I want to become a Marine Admiral someday. Kobe said with a proud smile. Nami looked at the two pirates and saw that they were okay with that. Makino spoke. Well, if that is your dream, then you should follow it. Makino said with a soft smile. Luffy shook his head. However, you have to not be naive. Not all Marines are the same, just as not all pirates are the same. The world is not black and white, just various shades of gray. Keep that in mind and you will go far. Nami and Kobe looked surprised at that. Nami finally introduced herself. Well, my name is Nami, I like money, tangerines, and my sister and my mom. By the way, why did a couple like you two become pirates anyway? It's obvious that you two are not that bad. At the mention of the couple, the two looked at each other before Makino started giggling and Luffy sighing, confusing the two new additions on the boat. Makino is my mother figure. Luffy said with a hand over his face, embarrassed at that question. Nami and Kobe blinked before screaming out. Nami started stuttering. I am so sorry for assuming. I just thought that you two were an item due to sailing out together all alone on the vast seas. Besides, how do you look so young? She practically looks like a teenager. Making Makino laugh even harder and Luffy sigh even more. One day later. The pirate flag was currently furled so that no one can see that they are pirates. Luffy, Makino, Kobe, and Nami stepped off the galleon and looked around the town. The four people entered a restaurant and ordered their meals. Luffy finished drinking his jug of milk. Now that we are here. Where are you gonna go now? Nami looked nervous and embarrassed. Well, I don't actually know, I haven't thought that far yet. I'm gonna stay with you guys for now. But, this will be a temporary partnership, okay? Nami yelled out with an embarrassed blush. Making Makino and Luffy shake their heads amused. Luffy pulled out a poster. I heard bounty hunter Rorano Zoro is here. I am planning to find him and have him join my crew. The second he said Zoro, however, the people around him jumped and looked at them fearfully, confusing the four. I see that name is taboo around here. Makino muttered. Kobe piped up. I heard from one of the people here that he is being held at the Marine Command Post here, led by Captain Morgan. The name Morgan made the people around them jump again, this time moving away from them, confusing Kobe. Why are they? Kobe muttered when Luffy interrupted him. I told you, the world isn't black and white. Just because someone is a Marine doesn't mean they are the epitome of good. The people's reaction here shows that this Morgan guy is a bad Marine. Kobe looked back at Luffy. But Luffy smacked him on the head with a hand chop. You are rather stubborn. This is the end of discussion. We are heading to the HQ. Luffy stood up and paid the slightly scared woman who heard their conversation. Luffy then exited the restaurant with Makino behind him. Nami and Kobe ran after him after shaking themselves out of their stupor. Walking towards the Marine HQ that looked rather dull and stupid, that kind of looks like a cigarette box, only shittier. Luffy can't help but comment. Making Makino sigh at his vulgarity. She has tried everything to try and wash out those vulgar words out of his head, but to no avail. The party of four reached a wall separating them from the HQ. You think we'll find this Zoro guy near here? Maybe he is in plain sight. Luffy asked, drawing a look of disbelief from Kobe. What are you talking about out in the open? There is no way that they would put a guy as dangerous like that out in the open. That's just impossible. Impossible, I say. Kobe screamed out. Luffy, however, was on the fence looking at a field where there was a single figure tied to a cross sitting down. Is that him? Luffy asked out loud. The other three move up beside him to see what appears to be a green-haired man with a black bandana tied to a cross. Kobe's eyes bulged out. Aye, it's him. Pirate Hunter Zoro. Nami looked a little confused. Why is he here and not in a cell? Aren't prisoners of the Marine supposed to be in a prison cell? Makino nodded. That is true, maybe there is more to this than it seems. Zoro looked towards the four. Oi. Do you want to die? Get lost. Luffy just grinned. Kobe looked ready to run like hell, while Makino and Nami looked annoyed. How rude. Makino said, with Nami nodding. The four people then heard the sound of wood hitting stone to their left. Looking towards the sound, they saw a little girl climbing a ladder, who then turned towards them and did a shushing motion. The girl then proceeded to get over the wall and started jogging to Zoro. Kobe panicked and tried to shake Luffy. Oi Luffy. What are you doing? Stop her before she gets hurt. Luffy however looked on curiously. The girl then stopped in front of Zoro. Hi, my name is Rika. I made some rice balls to thank you. Rika said with a small shy smile. Zoro's eyes softened at her, but he quickly shook himself. What are you doing here? Get out of here, brat. Zoro yelled out, trying to scare the girl away. He only succeeded in making her flinch. But the girl started to speak before. What are you doing here? A pompous voice screeched out. Everyone looked towards the entrance and saw a douchy-looking guy with helmet hair. Zoro yelling at little girls now. What a disgrace. The douch said with an arrogant smirk. Shut up, Helmeppo. Zoro said with a grimace. Luffy and the two girls started glaring at Helmeppo, with Kobe looking confused and slight hope that the Marines will escort her out. Hey little girl. You can't feed this guy, or else you will be classified as an accomplice. Helmeppo said with a stupid look on his face as he swiped a rice ball. He then ate it, ignoring the rantings of the girl. He then spat it out. What the hell? This is sweet. You stupid girl. You are supposed to use salt instead of sugar. Rika looked down at her feet. I thought that it would taste better with sugar than salt. Helmeppo looked annoyed. Give me that. The douch then swiped the other rice bowl before stomping on it. No wait. Rika started crying a little before Helmeppo interrupted her. You're a stupid girl. You know what, I will just give you a warning. You there. Throw her over the wall. Helmeppo finished pointing to the left Marine. The Marine reluctantly picked the crying girl up. He whispered. Curl into a ball, you won't get hurt much that way. He saw the girl nod a little, while crying. He then reluctantly tossed her over the wall. Luffy then held out a hand and caught the curled up little girl. He then held her close to his, patting her head and whispering calming words. Luffy then held her out to Makino. Can you three please take her back to her family? Makino nodded, as well as Nami and Kobe. Makino then carried the girl like a baby and started walking away with Nami and Kobe. Luffy turned towards the scene of the douch walking away from Zoro. Luffy then jumped over the wall and landed on the other side. He started walking to the tied up man. Stopping in front of Zoro, Luffy just stared. Zoro was a little unnerved at that emotionless stare. Oi oi oi. What are you doing here? Luffy just stared, then spoke out. You wanted that little girl out of here so she would be safe. I know that look, you didn't want her hurt. Zoro's eyebrow twitched. So? What's it to you? Get out of here. Zoro yelled out. Luffy just sat cross-legged in front of him. So, what happened that got you here? Luffy asked. Zoro just looked away. None of your business. All you need to know is that I'll just be here for a month before I get out. Luffy nodded and stood up, but before he left, Zoro called out to him. Wait. Can you give me that rice ball? Zoro asked. Luffy looked at the dirty rice ball and went back to him. This is smeared with dirt though. Luffy muttered before Zoro yelled out. Just give it here. Luffy looked away, but unknown to Zoro, he had an understanding smile on his face. He picked up the rice ball and removed as much of the dirt as he could before feeding it to Zoro. Zoro chewed and swallowed the rice ball. Despite being sweet, he sighed in relief. Tell her it was delicious. Luffy grinned completely at what he said. I will. Luffy then jumped over the wall and walked to where he could feel their presence. Later, back at the restaurant, Luffy came to the scene of Kobe asking why were those Marines doing things like that. Luffy walked over to the table where Makino, Nami, Kobe, and Rika were at. Little Rika was it? Luffy asked the little girl, who nodded. Luffy softly smiled at her. Zoro said that the rice ball was delicious. Luffy told her gently. Rika heard what he said and gained a big smile on her face. Really, oh thank you. She said with a happy smile. Kobe looked down, confused. I don't get it, then why is Roronoa Zoro there in the first place if he is not that bad? He said a little quietly but loud enough for people to hear. Rika rounded in on Kobe. It's not his fault. Zoro Nai-chan is there because of me, and Rika now went on about the reason why Zoro was stuck like that in the Marine base. Rika finished the story while sobbing a bit. I am thankful that he helped us. If he didn't, Rika started crying even harder when Makino and her mom came to her and hugged her. The scene, however, was ruined when the doors to the restaurant burst open. Oi, serve me some food. I am the son of Captain Morgan. The douche of a man, Helmeppo squeaked out like a bastard. He was served food much to the dismay of everyone here when he started boasting out. Heh. Maybe I'll kill Zoro tomorrow. He shouldn't have messed with me. The son of Captain Morgan. Kehyahya Helmeppo started laughing out loud while Luffy frowned. Standing up and slowly walking to the bastard. Drawing the attention of nearly everyone there. What about that promise? The bastard just went on without even noticing the danger he was in. A promise is only as good as the one who makes it. Kyayayayurh. When he started laughing, Luffy held out a fist and blew on it like a certain vice admiral. He then let loose and slammed his fist into Helmeppo's stomach, making an indent in his stomach and making him fly through a wall and indenting him on the wall of the building across the street. Peeling off the wall, Helmeppo fell to the ground. He sat up with bulged eyes. What the hell was that? Don't you know who I am? Luffy looked at him with a wrathful face. No, and frankly I don't care. If you think you can get your oh-so-daddy to help you now, then go. Luffy finished shouting out. Helmeppo ran while screaming. You will pay for this. Followed by the two marine guards. Luffy started towards the base. Makino, Nami, Kobe. I have decided. Zoro will join my crew. Makino nodded with a small smile, Nami shook her head with a smile, while Kobe looked sad that the marines are like this. Luffy told them that he would go ahead, ignoring everything else. Luffy dashed towards the base and hopped over the wall, sliding to a stop in front of Zoro. Zoro looked surprised that the guy from earlier came back and in such a hurry as well. Oi oi oi. What are you doing here? Why did you come back here? Luffy just stood there and looked at him before speaking. You know that you were promised to be let go after 1 month, right? Zoro nodded. Luffy looked to the right a bit. Well, he lied. Earlier he said he would execute you tomorrow. Zoro gained a tick mark on his head. That little shit. Luffy looked back to him before grinning. So you have a choice. Join my crew and become a pirate or die by the hands of marines. Luffy finished with a giant grin. Zoro smirked. You're the devil. Fine, but I am not leaving without my swords. They're in the base somewhere. Luffy grinned even wider. Alright then, first mate. I'll get your swords back. Luffy then turned around before jumping to the top of the base, making Zoro look with wide eyes. How the hell? Zoro however heard 3 thumps and saw 3 people heading to him. On the top of the base. I want that statue to look perfect. After this I will go and kill that brat myself. Rank is everything in this world. That in strength. A faggot with an axe hand called Captain Morgan. We see the terrified marines pulling up an ugly statue of Captain Morgan. Helmeppo arrived and started yapping about a person who punched him. Morgan started. Brat, why do you think I don't hit you? Because you low. Helmeppo couldn't finish as Morgan slammed a fist onto his head. Because you're not even worth hitting, you brat. Morgan was about to say something else when something passed through and broke the statue. The marines and Morgan's jaws dropped. My statue, who did this? Everyone saw a figure stand up in the dust cloud. Man, that was a rough landing. Luffy said as he dusted himself off. Luffy saw the yellow-haired douche. There you are, you little shit. Luffy started running towards Helmeppo in a ninja-style run before nabbing him with one hand and running towards the door. Morgan looked pissed off beyond measure. After him. I want his head on a pike. Morgan yelled out, scaring the other marines to do his bidding. Inside the base in an unknown corridor. We see Luffy drag the douche while walking down the hallway. Where are Zoro's swords being kept? Luffy menacingly said while dragging Helmeppo by the shirt. They're in my room, we just passed it. Luffy slowly turned around with a terrifying smile and a twitching eye. 1 major beating later. So this is your room? Luffy said while Helmeppo was behind him with large bumps on his face and head. Yes, Helmeppo said with a slur. Luffy opened the room and looked at it with horrified eyes. Everything is pink. Luffy however looked to the side and saw 3 swords. I can only assume all 3 belong to him because damn sure that this little shit can't use a sword even if it saves him. Luffy grabbed all 3 of the swords before looking out the window and bulging his eyes at the scene. Shit. Luffy then took a step back and charged through the wall and geped to the front of everyone. Luffy landed in front of everyone as the marines fired, however Luffy just quickly phased his Tombojiri into existence and deflected the bullets away. Boy, I can't leave you guys for a few minutes, can't I? Luffy said with a giant grin as he stood in a pose with his captain's coat billowing in the wind. Not looking at the 4, Luffy called out. Oi. Makino-chan. Is Zoro untied yet? Makino just shook her head with a resigned smile. Hi. He is untied. Why? Luffy just threw the swords behind him, making Zoro move to catch all the swords. Oi. These are my swords here. Why did you throw them? Luffy just looked back a little. Less yapping and more fighting. Luffy jumped towards Zoro and slapped his back playfully. Oh. Santoryu man. I want to see how good you are. Luffy just said with a big grin. Zoro stumbled forward from the slight force. Looking back a bit before looking at the scared Marines and angry Marines. Zoro sighed. Alright then, but know this, I am going to be the strongest swordsman in the world. If you try to stop me then I will cut you down. Got that, Captain? Luffy's grin got bigger, Makino smiled, Nami shook her head smiling a little, while Kobe got stars in his eyes. Of course I don't have a problem. After all, the Pirate King must have no less than that. Now Zoro. Do you want to turn the world upside down with me? Luffy said with a laugh and a huge grin. Zoro smirked while placing a sword in his jaws. He held the other swords in his hands. Like I have a choice. Now come. Marines. Zoro started running towards the Marines, who after Morgan threatened them, they reluctantly charged the newly instated pirate. Zoro easily dispatched the weak Marines. Morgan looked pissed and jumped towards Zoro, with his axe hand raised to cleave Zoro in two. When Luffy seemingly teleported and blocking the axe hand with a bare hand. Looking epic in the process. Sorry about that. But your opponent is me. Luffy said with a nonchalant and menacing smile. Making Morgan sweat a bit in a little fear. With a giant grin and slightly glowing eyes, Luffy muttered out very clearly. Let's dance. Luffy threw back the hand, making Morgan stagger backwards from the force as Luffy ran towards him with his weapon held out in his right hand. Jumping over Morgan, Luffy slammed the pommel of his weapon on the back of his head, making Morgan stagger forwards this time. Luffy then proceeded to give Morgan a vicious beatdown, cutting him up with a blade, but not killing him. Luffy then jumped in front of Morgan, who looked tired and dazed from the beatdown he was receiving. Luffy grinned before holding his Tombojiri above his head, twirling it a bit before doing a large overhead slash that gave Morgan a large wound that suggested that the enemy was trying to cleave them in two. Luffy stood above Morgan, who was on the verge of losing consciousness. Let this be a reminder, I can end you whenever I want. Luffy then started walking back to Zoro, Makino, Nami, and Kobe. When he heard cheering to his right, looking at the Marines who were cheering, Luffy smiled. I guess they didn't like Morgan's rule, huh? Kobe ran in front of him, with stars in his eyes. Luffy-san, you look so cool, Kobe said with a smile. Makino looked at him with her arms crossed, but smiling a little. I guess you are really hopeless when it comes to battle, huh? Still can't hold back too much? Luffy just laughed and scratched his head. Sorry. You know I don't really know how to hold back much. Suo, yeah. Anyways, Zoro boo, however he was interrupted as Zoro fell backwards. Making the four panic a bit before hearing him. I am so hungry, Zoro said tiredly. Making Luffy and Makino start laughing as Nami looked a little pissed while Kobe looked relieved. 2 hours later, back at the restaurant. UWAAH, I am stuffed like a turkey. Zoro said, while cleaning his teeth with a toothpick. The various empty plates on the table in front of him was the only evidence that Zoro ate like it was his last meal. I still can't understand how you would survive a month without food or water. That is plain trying to kill yourself right there. I wouldn't even last 3 days. Luffy said while chewing on a large piece of meat and drinking a large mug of milk whenever he could. Zoro looked at Luffy. I think it is better that I ask how the hell you can eat that much. Luffy just continued eating while Makino shook her head. It's better you ask later. I don't really know much either. Only that he would say it to us when we get a first mate. Makino said with a small smile. Luffy perked up at that and paused eating. Swallowing the food down, Luffy started. Right, and Zoro, you are my first mate. Therefore later I will tell why most of my diet comprises meat and milk. For now we just celebrate. Luffy stood up and held out a mug. The beginning of a great adventure. Nami, Zoro, and Makino couldn't help but smile brightly. Kanpai. The four kept celebrating while Kobe and Rika played around the restaurant. The restaurant's atmosphere was very lively, playful, and happy. However, the scene was interrupted by a bunch of Marines walking in with sullen and sorry looks on their faces. Excuse me. But you are pirates, right? Luffy nodded. Yep. We are the newly created Straw Hat Pirates. Luffy said with a huge smile. Making everyone sweat drop. He is very cheerful. The Marine coughed. Well, we are grateful that you freed all of us from Morgan's dictatorship. We can't allow pirates on this island. He was stopped from Luffy raising a hand up with an understanding smile. Don't worry. We are just gonna resupply and then we are gonna leave. Okay. For now, Luffy said with shadowed eyes, making everyone nervous. Before Luffy grabbed the Marine and sat him down before giving him a mug of beer. Luffy grinned widely and brightly. Come celebrate with us. It is to celebrate your freedom from dictatorship, right? The Marine looked at him with wide eyes before smiling a little. I guess so then. Men. Let's have a party. Everyone then had fun, making hilarious scenes while eating delicious food. The next day. We see Luffy, Makino, Zoro, and Nami at the pier getting ready to embark to the next island. Kobe, the citizens, and the Marines were there to see them off after clearing up with the Marines earlier that Kobe wanted to join them. The 3 pirates and 1 thief got on the ship that then unfurled its sails as it started slowly sailing away. Luffy, Makino, Zoro, and Nami started waving goodbye to everyone. As Shell Town was no longer in sight, Luffy then called the 3 people to him. "Now Makino and Zoro, you were curious why my diet was like that, right?" Seeing Zoro and Makino nod while Nami looked curious. Luffy nodded. "Well, not only those are my favorite foods and drinks. But my devil fruit gave me an excuse to have this diet. Drinking milk will make my bones bigger, denser, and stronger. Every 1,000 gallons of milk will make me grow 1 foot. For the meat on the other hand, since that is apparently the only thing not bone related. The more meat I consume, the bigger, denser, and stronger my muscles become. Every 500 kilograms of meat I consume will make my overall physique become more muscled and defined. However, that doesn't stop me from exercising and training. So I am getting stronger in 2 ways. My diet and my training." Zoro, Makino, and Nami looked at him with wide eyes. Zoro shook his head. "So wait. Let me get this straight. If you eat and drink enough, you may become another Whitebeard," he said, gaining the attention of the 2. Luffy got into a thinking pose. "Maybe I don't know my limits. So we will have to see in the future then, eh?" Luffy finished with a huge grin, making everyone gain a sweat drop before smiling and shaking their heads. Luffy went to the figurehead before looking to the horizon, seeing the sun just rise. "Let's move forward." Luffy is just sitting on the Geister Blaster figurehead, looking towards the horizon. While Zoro was sleeping at the mast near the figurehead, Makino and Nami were chatting on the left railing. "So Nami, who is your sister and mom? From the way you keep mentioning them with so much love, it makes me want to know what kind of people they are," Makino said as she started leaning on the railway. Nami looked a little tense at the mention of her loved ones, but shook her head, telling herself that these are good people despite being pirates. "Well, my sister is named Najiko, who actually likes tangerines and guns," Nami said while staring off into the sea. Makino saw her smile softly. Makino smiled. "She must be one of a kind." Nami looked at her. "Yeah. She is." Nami smiled. Nami looked to the sky. "Now, my mom on the other hand. She is pretty cool." Nami grinned. "Her name is Bellamere, she also likes tangerines. We kind of got our love for tangerines from her. I know she likes baking a butterscotch pie." Makino looked at her with surprise. "Did you just say Bellamere?" Makino said with a surprised tone, making Nami look at her with curiosity. "Yes, why?" Makino shook her head. "I don't know if she is the same person, but the Bellamere I heard about was a former Marine captain, Bellamere the Scarlet Mace." Nami looked at her surprised. "Why is that important?" Makino looked at her with a deadpan stare. "Because Luffy might decide to ask them to join the crew," she said with a straight expression, surprising Nami. "Whaat?" Makino shook her head. "Forget what I said, Island." The 2 young women's conversation was interrupted by a yell from the resident captain. Luffy grinned widely as he slammed the of his spear on the figurehead before slashing towards his front, making the ship sails unfurl fully and sail even faster to the island. At the pier, the 4 people looked around as the ship came to a stop beside the docks. There were no people to greet them. The town was too quiet. Zoro was the first to say something. "Do you hear anything?" Nami shook her head. "No. It's so quiet." Luffy nodded. "That is correct," and kind of unsettling, Luffy lifted his spear and slammed it lightly to the ground again. A strange melting sound was heard, making Nami and Zoro look around confused while Makino's eyes widened in surprise. Makino looked back to the deck, making Nami and Zoro look as well, curious as to what the sound was when their eyes widened in horror. The black mist appeared around the deck as the various parts of the floor turned completely black. But what scared Nami and made Zoro uneasy are the several armored skeletons crawling out of the black holes before standing to their full height of 9 feet. They then proceeded to walk around, patrolling the ship with their giant battle axes. 1. Makino looked at Luffy. "Is this really necessary? Do you really need to use the SS?" Makino said, a little nervous. Luffy shrugged. "Meh. I don't really want to phase the ship out. This is much simpler," Luffy said a little lazily. Makino looked at Luffy before shaking her head. "It is simpler," he said. "What's so simple about summoning a skeleton army?" she whispered to herself. Luffy looked back. "What was that?" Makino shook her head with a whistle. "Nothing. Nothing." Luffy stared at his mother figure for a bit before looking back to the empty town. "I'll go on ahead. You 3 can catch up." Luffy then hopped off the ship before disappearing behind a corner. Zoro looked at one of the armored skeletons before walking up to it. The skeleton turned its head to him before fully turning its body to him. Zoro looked at it. "This is a little creepy." Nami was behind Makino. Wah what the hell rthth they Nami stuttered behind Makino. Makino sighed. She grabbed Zoro and Nami before she dragged them and hopped off the ship with the two following. Makino let them go as she turned around to face the two shaken crew members. Those armored skeletons are called SS, or the full name skeleton soldiers. Luffy normally doesn't use them, but uses them when he is either lazy, very annoyed, or completely pissed off. Don't let appearance fool you. They may be big, but they are also fast. I have no idea how many he can summon. The fact that their attacks can bypass devil fruit defenses make them all the more dangerous. 2. Zoro and Nami nodded a little confused by what she meant by devil fruit defenses as they turned to see the skeletons walk around on the deck. The two shook their heads before joining Makino, who was walking towards the corner where Luffy disappeared behind. They turned around the corner to see Luffy sitting down in front of a little dog while scratching it. Who's a good dog? You are. Yes, you are. Luffy was scratching the belly of the small white dog. The dog is apparently enjoying the petting, evidenced by its tail wagging. Luffy stopped and looked towards the three. Ah. You're all here now. I found this dog in front of this pet food store. I don't know why he's staying here though. What are you doing to Chaochu? A voice yelled out. Turning back, Luffy and Co. saw an old man jogging towards them holding a bowl of dog food. Luffy grinned at the old man, making the person stop and look at him wary and confused. So that's his name, huh? Chaochu. Nice name for a dog as cool as him. Luffy said as he scratched behind Chaochu's ears. The old man looked at him with amazed eyes. I'm surprised that Chaochu is letting you touch him. He normally bites anyone else, the only reason he doesn't bite me is because I was friends with his owner. Makino sat down and started petting the dog, while Luffy stood up and turned to the old man. I forgot. It's kind of rude that we didn't introduce ourselves. My name is Luffy, the green-haired woman with the naginata is Makino, the green-haired guy with the scary face is Zoro. Shut up. Zoro yelled in the background. And the orange-haired woman is Nami. Nice to meet you, we are the Straw Hat Pirates. Luffy finished with a huge grin. Makino facepalmed while Zoro grimaced and Nami yelled at him. Why did you blatantly state that? The old man looked alarmed at that. Nani pirates. Luffy laughed at him. Don't worry, we are not the kind of pirates who attack civilians. Though judging from your reaction. A pirate is the reason that this town is rather empty. The man just shook his head. Well, yes, a pirate by the name of Buggy has been raiding this town for a while. As we started evacuating, they have held themselves up in the bar near the town square. As the man just finished, a house blew up, rather flashily. Making everyone look at it with surprised eyes. Nami and the man with horror, Zoro with startled surprise, Makino with a little surprise, and Luffy with a little surprise and a little boredom. Luffy turned back towards the man and nodded. You know what, we'll take care of him for you. The man shook his head. You don't need to help nonsense. You need help, we will give you help. Now I just have one question. What is your name? You never told us. The old man shook his head. My name is Boodle, I am the mayor of this town. Nami looked at the dog. Where is his owner? You're friends with his owner, right? The mayor looked at her with sad eyes. His owner died a few years ago. Makino raised a hand over her mouth. Does he not know that his owner is dead? Luffy shook his head. No, I believe he knows his owner is dead. He is probably staying here because this is the last thing he has of his owner. His treasure. Luffy finished just as everyone looked towards him with wide eyes as they all saw Chaochu nod his head to what he said. Boodle was the first to shake himself out of his stupor. How did you roar was heard throughout the town. Boodle looked panicky. That was the roar of the pet of Buggy's second mate. Moji and his pet lion. Boodle said as he ran to the back of a building a little away from them. Nami looked scared as well, while Zoro looked a little too happy at the fact he can fight. Makino shook her head in exasperation, while Luffy laughed out loud like a certain vice admiral. This will be a great test, Zoro. You're up. Nami, I want to see how you fight later. Zoro smirked. Alright, Captain. Nami looked at Luffy like he was crazy. I am a thief. Not a fighter. Nami yelled at him with shark teeth. Luffy looked at Nami with a small and understanding smile. I know that, Nami, but you have to understand. You have to know how to fight well, as we won't always be there to protect you. I don't want to see or know that one of them died because they couldn't fight well. Understand? Luffy finished with a gentle smile. Nami looked at Luffy, surprised at his reason, and can't help but think, this guy is a pirate. Why would he care? He cares about him. Pirates don't care about the lives of their crew and innocence. But he does. Nami looked down and then backed up at him. She sees that Luffy is patiently waiting. Alright, but I will try. Don't even think I will one-shot them. Okay, Nami said with a huff. Luffy smiled even wider. That's enough for me. He said as Makino smiled and Zoro smirked. The heartwarming scene was then interrupted by a grayish-pink looking lion. Leaping into view with an equally weirder person on top of it. I am Buggy's second mate. Beast Tamer Moji. Luffy can't help himself, but that's a weird looking hat you got there, buddy. Luffy pointed out with an amazed and an amused look on his face. Zoro tried but couldn't help but snigger quietly a few times, while Makino and Nami giggled a bit. Moji gained a tick mark on his head. Shut up. And for your information, this is my hair. However, that statement did not make things better, instead. Zoro was now laughing a bit while covering his mouth with a hand, while Makino and Nami started laughing a little loudly, and Luffy hehehehe. That makes it all the more weird. Luffy gave his signature laugh, clearly amused by this guy. Moji looked pissed at that. Shut up. I am the beast tamer. There is no animal that I can't tame. Here for example. Moji then walked over to the dog and held out a hand. Shake. Moji ordered. Tauchu looked a little angry at the way he was ordered and promptly bit Moji's hand, making him scream out in pain, flailing his hand around like a retard while Chaochu was leaving a few bite marks. Chaochu then let go and ran to the front of the store again. Luffy and crew could not help it anymore and started laughing very loudly. Hahaha. Oh, that is the most hilarious thing I have ever seen today. You fail. Luffy said, laughing out loud, completely and utterly amused at the self-proclaimed beast tamer. Zoro was laughing just as loudly. Hahaha. And you want me to fight this guy, Captain? Isn't that a little bit overkill? Zoro finished with an amused grin. Makino is leaning on the wall of a building as she laughed as well. Luffy isn't so mean to that man. Let him believe. Hahaha. Makino said while laughing. Nami sat down on a nearby box as she laughed hard while holding her stomach. Hahaha. I can't breathe. That has got to be one of the most hilarious failures I have ever seen. Nami couldn't stop laughing, she had tears in her eyes. Moji gained several more tick marks. That is it. Richie. Get them. The lion then leaped, intent on tearing the four people apart. Luffy gained a serious and evil-like smile. Zoro. As soon as he said that, the three-sword user leaped into action and seemingly disappeared from view before appearing behind the lion, with one hand outstretched with a single katana, as the other two were still sheathed. The lion fell down, knocked out. Killing a weak enemy does not really appeal to me. It's just pathetic. Zoro said as he sheathed his sword. Machi looked horrified that Richie was easily beaten. While Machi was about to say something else when something crossed his mind. Wait, Zoro. As in Pirate Hunter, Zoro Machi looked ready to shit himself back and forth. Zoro looked at him with a bored smirk. I quit pirate hunting. I am now a pirate myself, of course. Machi looked beyond horrified. Wait. I can just leave. I leave and tell Boogie you're dead. Moji tried pleading. But. Luffy lost all traces of a smile on his face. His face is now shadowed. You tried to attack and you think you can just leave. Right when you see you're losing. Moji looked like he regretted his choice of words. Luffy looked up with a frown and a vein mark on his head. Luffy disappeared and appeared behind Moji. I hate people like that. Luffy then grabbed the back of Moji's head. Luffy then proceeded to slam him into different buildings, making sure not to break the building and only the person he's holding. Luffy then thought he had enough, so he threw him up into the air as he screamed like a little girl. Zoro. Toss me the lion. Luffy ordered. Zoro nodded and kicked the knocked out lion towards Luffy, who then grinned widely in delight. Perfect. The lion and its master were heading towards him in a perfect collision course. Luffy then held out his weapon and spun it a few times before getting into a batter stance. Bada bada bada, swing bada. Luffy yelled out as he hit both of them with his weapon with a loud thwack, launching the knocked out lion and its screaming master. Luffy then turned around towards his crew. Sorry Zoro. I kind of stole your prey from you. Luffy said with an apologizing grin. Zoro shook his head. Nah, that's alright, Captain. I saw you get frustrated, so I figured I can let you have that. Luffy nodded relieved. Is that right? Makino shook her head with a sigh. Luffy, you'll never change, will you? Luffy just laughed. Nami looked towards where Luffy launched the idiot. So are we going to attack? Or she was interrupted by the sound of Boodle crying. Why? I can't even defend my own town. You youngsters still have to defend it for us. Boodle was about to do something stupid when Luffy placed a hand on Boodle's shoulder, making the crying old man look up at him. Luffy smiled at the crying mare. There is nothing wrong with asking for help. No one needs to carry the burden by themselves. Luffy finished with a smile. Boodle then bowed his head. Then please. Save us from this menace. Luffy smiled as the rest of the crew smiled as well. Luffy grinned widely. Of course we will be old men. Luffy stood up as he started walking to where he senses the now panicking boogie pirates. Makino, Zoro, and Nami walked with him just slightly behind him. Boodle saw them disappear from his side as the villagers came running to him. Line of breaks. Nami looked towards Luffy. Maybe he can help me. No. Don't delude yourself, Nami. All you need now is just 13 million Biri. Focus. Nami however saw something on Luffy's neck. A necklace. What is that necklace? I haven't seen that kind before. I'll have to ask later. The four pirates then stopped in front of a tavern. However, Buggy and his crew were on top of the tavern. They were waiting. A person who can only be described as a clown wearing a captain's coat and hat. So you are the flashy bastards that defeated Moji, and apparently Rorano Zoro is with you as well. The big red-nosed man said. The man twitched for some reason. I feel like someone insulted my nose. Luffy looked at him. Are you by any chance Buggy? Buggy the clown? Luffy asked with a raised eyebrow. The man nodded. That I am, you flashy bastard. Who's asking? Buggy angrily said. Luffy then laughed out loud. Ha 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 ha. Shanks was right. You do look like a clown. Big red nose and all that. Luffy continued laughing. Much to the horror of Nami and Buggy's crew. Nami yelled at Luffy. Are you insane? Why did you do that? Nami yelled with shark teeth. Buggy looked pissed. Fire the buggy ball at those flashy bastards, damn it. The cannon aimed at the four. Zoro looked a little nervous, while Nami looked terrified. Makino just looked like she knew something. Luffy smirked while slamming his weapon into the ground beside him, letting it stand upright. The cannon fired a cannonball with Buggy's Jolly Roger on it. The ball was soaring to Luffy, who was grinning like a madman. Buggy's eyes widened. Why is he? He is smiling in the face of death. However, he let out a sigh of relief when he saw the straw hat wearing man raise a hand and catch it. Okay, he just knew that he wouldn't die from that. But Buggy and his crew's jaws dropped and eyes bulged at the sight. Nami was yelling at Luffy. You idiot. You could have told us you were going to do that. Luffy just laughed. Sorry. Luffy apologized. Not really sorry. Luffy looked towards Buggy, who had a bad feeling at what the straw hat wearing man would do. Luffy then got into a pitcher's stance as he readied the cannonball in his hands. This is a thing I learned from OG-CHAN Grandpa. In Katsu Bazooka 3, Luffy then threw the cannonball, but not too hard as he just wanted to beat them up. Everyone except for Luffy and Makino went wide-eyed at the throw. The cannonball connected and blew up the tavern, turning it into a pile of rubble. Luffy admired his throw. That was a good throw if I do say so myself. A bit weak, but yeah. Still good. Luffy said with a grin. Buggy and a person beside him got up from the rubble, as well as a few more of his crew members that were lucky. You flashy bastard. I'll make you pay for that. Boys, avenge your fallen brethren. Buggy said as he readied up some of his knives. Luffy lazily turned his head to Nami. Gear up, Nami. Nami was about to say something when she remembered what he said earlier. She finally nodded in determination and reached into her skirt. Nami pulled out several sticks and locked together a staff. Nami then proceeded to take out some of the minions, knocking one out by slamming the end of the staff on his head, while swinging a pole under the feet of some of the pirates, making them fall over backwards. It seems like Nami was doing fine, however she didn't have the stamina of a fighter. As evidenced by her taking heavy breaths now and her movements getting slower. Luffy turned slightly to Makino, who saw him and nodded to the unasked order. Nami didn't see a pirate about to take her out from behind until it was too late. But Makino appeared and pretty much bitch-smacked the pirate into the rubble of the tavern. Don't worry, Nami, that's enough for now. You've done well for a non-fighter. Makino said softly with a smile. Nami slumped to the ground, tired as all hell. Arigato. Makino saw Nami stopped as Makino looked at her with a stare. Makino started as she did a slash with her Naginata without looking, taking out 4 pirates at once. Sweat dripping, Nami lifted her hands up. Haha, arigato, Makino-chan. Nami said with a sweat drop. Makino then smiled brightly as she cut down 3 more pirates. Making her look a little scary with that. Makino then held her Naginata to her waist as she prepared for a swing. Nami, duck. Nami did as told. Verdant Ring 4, Makino yelled out as she spun in a circle, creating a bright green ring-like blade attack that expanded, cutting and knocking out all the pirates around them. Buggy and the man beside him looked pissed that their crew members were defeated easily. You flashy bastards. How dare you? I won't be defeated here just yet. Kabaji. Flashily end their lives. Buggy yelled. The man beside Buggy then looked at him. Yes, Captain. Kabaji then jumped down as a unicycle then appeared out of nowhere for him to land on. Luffy looked at Zoro. I think it's your turn, Zoro. The said man turned to him surprised before shrugging. Alright then, Captain. Zoro then walked slowly as he readied his 3 swords, one in each hand and his prized sword in his mouth. The Baji looked at the ready swordsman. A swordsman, eh? Moreover, it's the famous or rather infamous Rorano Zoro, the pirate hunter. What an honor. Kabaji said in a mocking tone. Zoro smirked despite having the sword in between his teeth. I quit pirate hunting, as I am now a pirate. But enough talk. We fight. With that said, Zoro seemingly disappeared and reappeared a few times, each time appearing closer and closer. Kabaji decided to try and finish this in one strike. Here I go. Kyoku. Sateninshoku Carnival Kabaji swung his sword, letting a rainbow of colors fly out to try and pierce into Zoro. Zoro looked annoyed at that. He then ran up the wall of a building as the colors kept trying to stab him. Zoro looked at Kabaji, who looked a little pissed that the attacks weren't connected. Zoro noticed that he was not even moving. Ho. He can't move and has to focus. TSK. This will be too easy. Zoro then leaped off the building as he positioned himself for his attack. Kabaji looked a little panicked that he was getting too close. Torgari. Zoro yelled out as he passed the acrobat, who fell down, knocked out from the strong attack. Zoro stood up as he sheathed all his blades. HMPH. You're better off just being in a circus than a pirate. Zoro started walking towards the girls as Buggy fumed in silent fury. Am I going to lose to these upstarts? Buggy jumped down as he readied his knives. I am not going to fall here. I will conquer the Grand Line and become Pirate King. Do you even think you can conquer that? See you flashy bastard. Play Luffy's fierce attack. The air became tense as Luffy and Buggy stared each other down. After a few moments, Luffy grinned. I don't want to conquer anything. It's just that the one with the most freedom in the seas is the Pirate King. Luffy finished with a giant grin. Then Luffy's fierce attack. Buggy nearly choked at what he said as he saw a familiar silhouette. With no stutter or falter, he said the exact same words as Captain. I need to end him. Buggy then jumped up and held the knives between his fingers like claws. Then you'll have to get past me. Mugiwara. Luffy just grinned as he grabbed his weapon and jumped to Buggy. I will. Luffy swung his spear to slash at Buggy's side when Buggy blocked the blade with his daggers in his left hand as he threw the daggers in his right hand towards Luffy's head. Luffy just tilted his head to dodge the first 3 blades before catching the 4th one in his teeth. The 2 captains jumped away from each other. Luffy spat the knife out as he ran towards Buggy, who readied more daggers as he launched his hand towards Luffy. Bara cannon. With a look of surprise, Luffy got down and slid on the ground towards Buggy as he readied his weapon to slash Buggy's. Buggy detached his torso from his waist to dodge Luffy's slash. Buggy's legs then hopped backwards until it was on top of the rubble as he reattached his torso and hand back to his body. Luffy stood up before looking at Buggy, who looked at him with a serious air. Buggy. Devil fruit. Buggy nodded with a smirk. Yes, I did eat one. The bara know me. It allows me to detach any part of my body. I did not eat it by choice though. It is all because of that annoying red hair. Hell. Even your freaking straw hat reminds me so much of that red-haired bastard. Luffy raised an eyebrow. Oh. You mean Shanks. This hat is his. I am just holding on to it for him. Grinned Luffy. Buggy's eye twitched. No wonder that straw hat annoys me so much. That is his damned hat. It's because of him I involuntarily ate this fruit. The two did not notice a certain orange-haired girl and green-haired gorilla sneak into Buggy's ship. Insert one sob story later. Luffy looked at Buggy with a deadpan face. So he saved you in the end. Buggy looked pissed that he only thought of that part. That's not the point. Buggy yelled out with shark teeth. Zoro looked on before speaking. But he did save you. Didn't he? Buggy just looked beyond pissed and annoyed and raised a foot pointing towards Luffy, who raised an eyebrow. Bara buzzsaw. Buggy's foot detached and launched at high speeds. Luffy saw the shoe gain blades before they started to spin like a buzzsaw. Luffy deflected the attack with his weapon, launching it away from him before turning to Buggy. You'll have to do better than Thaw. Luffy was interrupted as 3 knives went past his face, taking his straw hat and necklace off his head, making Luffy widen his eyes. That stupid straw hat is annoying me so much. Buggy said with an annoyed face. Luffy's eyes begin to get shadowed by his hair. You little shit. Those 2 things are my treasures. Buggy looked like Christmas came early. Oh really? Then you should have done a better job in protecting it. Buggy then threw 4 more knives, ruining the straw hat. He laughed as he was about to throw another knife to the necklace next when a heart appeared in front of him. What? The music started playing in the air, Play Megalovania slowed down by 30%. The ground started shaking as Buggy looked towards Luffy, whose eyes were completely covered by his hair and his mouth was set in a hard line. Zoro looked a little nervous at that. Nami and Makino came out of the ship holding 2 bags when this happened. Nami looked confused and a little scared, while Makino looked worried. The pebbles and rubble around everyone started to slowly fly into the air. Luffy finally spoke. Say Buggy. Do you want to have a bad time? Cause you won't like what happens next. Luffy said in a monotone voice. Buggy looked a little nervous. He didn't even try to talk. Luffy just sighed. No answer. Alright then. The sky turned black and the entire area turned into a black fog that can still be seen through. Let's get this over with. Luffy said with a tired and annoyed voice. Luffy raised his head and showed everyone his left eye is on. He then raised a hand and clenched it into a fist. The heart in front of Buggy changed, confusing everyone but Makino. Luffy raised his hand and slammed it downwards. Buggy flew down and slammed into the ground. He then raised his hands and started swinging it side to side, up and down, back and forth, making the screaming Buggy smash into several buildings a few times. Luffy's eye glowed before several huge chunks of rubble got lifted and started flying to Buggy, smashing into him several times. Had enough, Buggy. Luffy then slammed him one last time into his ship before making the screaming Buggy fly towards him at high speeds. Luffy then grabbed his weapon before deciding that he wouldn't kill Buggy. He then prepared for a swing, and with a loud thwack, Luffy launched the clown into the sky. The music stopped. Luffy's eye turned off as he silently walked towards his two treasures with a depressed aura. He brought the necklace back to his neck. But he held the straw hat with gentle hands. He sighed sadly before putting it on his head. "It's not the same," Luffy quietly said as he took the ruined straw hat off his head. Zoro, Nami, and Makino walked towards their captain. Makino stood beside the distraught pirate captain. "Don't worry, Luffy. I can fix it." Makino held out her hand, waiting for Luffy to place it in her hand. Luffy looked at his prized hat before gently putting it in her hand. Makino turned the straw hat over as she looked at the hole. "Yeah, I can fix it in probably a few hours." Luffy looked hopeful. "Really?" he said while appearing right in front of Makino, who just nodded silently. Luffy just hugged her. "Arigato, Akachan." Makino just smiled and patted his head with her other hand. "No problem, Luffy-kun." Luffy separated from Makino and took a deep breath before sighing. Nami and Zoro looked at each other before nodding, planning to ask Makino about what was that later. The four pirates heard a bunch of people heading their way. Luffy turned his head to the direction of the noise and saw villagers and the mayor Boodle. The four pirates saw the villagers stop and look at them with suspicion as Boodle kept walking on to them. Luffy started walking as well. The atmosphere was tense. The pirate captain and the mayor stopped right in front of each other. Boodle suddenly bowed his head, surprising the villagers. "Thank you so much for ridding us of that menace, Buggy," Boodle said in gratitude. Luffy just patted his shoulder. "It is no problem. We're just glad we could help." "Ah. I have a question." Boodle stood back up fully and saw Luffy's huge grin. "Would you allow this island to be put under my protection?" Boodle looked surprised before turning to the villagers who had uncertain looks. Looking back to Luffy, Boodle can't help but ask. "What does that entail exactly?" Luffy smiled at that smart move of his. "Excellent question. Well, nothing much. This island will be identified as an island I will protect should they be in trouble. When we dock here we can stock up on supplies and probably just stay for a few days just to have a party or two. That is pretty much what I am asking." Luffy finished. The villagers looked relieved at that, while Boodle just nodded in acceptance. "That is a great idea. But first, villagers." Boodle asked towards the villagers. Who talked with each other. "They saved us." "Yeah, but they are pirates. If they wanted to loot and plunder, they would have done it already." "Yeah, let's accept it." "Yeah. Let's do it." "We accept." The villagers roared out in happiness. Luffy nodded, smiling. "I'm sorry but we don't really have time to stay here. So I'll give you this." Luffy said as he reached into the air. His hand disappeared as if he put his hand in a bag. Luffy pulled out a huge bag and set it down and then reached into the space again and pulled out a flag with the same Jolly Roger on his captain's coat. See in chapter 1. This bag has at least 5 million beery. You can use this to repair your town if it's enough. And this flag is for when you build a flag post. Luffy finished with a grin. Unaware that everyone except Makino was gawking at him for the absurd amount of beery he just gave away. Makino was just smiling with pride. Line of breaks. The four pirates were now boarding the Sea Dragon's blade when they were interrupted by a bunch of cheers and faint barks. The captain and crew turned around to see the townspeople, the mayor Boodle, and Chaochu waving and shouting goodbyes. Luffy grinned widely as Zoro smirked, while Nami and Makino smiled and waved. The four boarded the ship as Luffy jumped to the figurehead and slammed the pommel of his weapon on the figurehead once more. The Sea Dragon's blade then started sailing away from the Orange Islands, but not before Boodle yelled out. "You brats. Thank you for helping us." The villagers agreed and shouted their gratitude towards the ship. Everyone then saw the ship disappear into the horizon. Mayor Boodle muttered. "Those pirates will go far." Chaochu barked in agreement. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the Oblivion Overlord for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.